Joe here, Joe Moore, Kyle Buller. We are doing Solidarity Fridays today. And yeah, we'll actually get into what the origin story there is in a minute. But a reminder that starting September 23, so you have probably 20 days or less to sign up for this amazing program. 12 hours of live contact time, 47 total hours of education, and we go all over the map, right? We set a foundation for you to understand this really strange landscape that is psychedelia, how you can get involved, all the different avenues, what's legal, what isn't, where certain things are legal, where they aren't, how illegal are certain things in a place like Oakland, for instance, and much more. Yeah, so I think that's a good little primer there. CEs are available. You can learn more at psychedelicstoday.com, any of our socials, or psychedelicEducationCenter.com. Cool. So again, kicks off September 23. So hope to see you there. All right. So let's start with why Solidarity Fridays. It was a So if those of you who've been with us for a while recall, this segment started right around the time of the United States kind of shutting down from COVID. We just had a lot of free time on our hands, I guess, and really needed to help everybody. So our biggest contribution, we thought, was being able to do 2 episodes a week from our original 1. And the solidarity being, we are in solidarity with you. We have the same issues. Stuff isn't really going super well for, too many folks. So what can we do to really improve our lives and yours? And more media was the answer, I think. Yeah. Is that how you recall it, Kyle?
Yeah, I remember, we were going into lockdown, the protests were happening, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. It was just everything just was just super up in the air. And yeah, I think it was a way to stand in solidarity and just I think also too for our own process, right? Just really trying to share what's going on. I mean, these episodes I feel like have been much more personal to some degree, being able to, talk about the news and do those segments. But I mean, we've also been digging into, other topics that might be a little bit more personal to us. We've been weaving in, some of that social justice component over the past few months as those issues started to arise. And so, yeah, it was just a way to, just say that we're standing with everything that's going on, and just trying to tease it apart, right? There's just so much stuff that's going on, happening. It's confusing. And, I think even just for our own process, how do we tease that apart and think about it, which has been fun, and, also maybe a little vulnerable and scary at times, right? I think, with some of our other interviews, we bring ourselves into it, definitely, and share stories. But I feel like this segment has been definitely a little bit more personal and vulnerable at times.
Right. Because we're not just interviewing people, right? It's us getting more airtime, and it's a big deal for us to be able to speak our observations and feelings on certain things, and critiques. So that's the origin. Solidarity is a funny term because it harkens back to socialist movements, anarchist movements, stuff like that. And while there's some threads of that occasionally, it's it's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about other stuff. Human potential, police brutality, the drug war, and much more. The Compass misbehavior was a really good kind of frame for that, in my opinion, too. It fit neatly into this whole little topic set, and essentially it evolved to a weekly news show. That's how we were seeing it, and then now we're trying to redefine it and figure out what we want to do with this.
We've talked a lot about changing the title and what are we doing with it at times.
So expect some change. Don't know what it's going to look like, but just wanted to give you all a little bit of background on what we're doing there.
If anybody has any suggestions, love to hear from you too.
Yeah, please email us. We'd love it. support@psychedelicstoday.com. So, next up, last week we had kind of a powerhouse little episode there. We got an incredible amount of positive feedback, minimal negative feedback. Yeah, and kind of want to talk about that just a little bit more. So the discussion was around decriminalized nature and some kind of bad behavior I was noticing that I wasn't really happy with. It felt like bullying to me, and didn't feel like really productive or psychedelic behavior. These kinds of tactics are typical in social justice movements, but perhaps not the most productive. My issues are with the leadership for kind of encouraging it and letting it happen. Individual chapters, like I'm sure there's a lot more reasonable people out there.
There were some individual chapters that definitely like sided with us and could support us, right?
Right, and even that whole Seattle episode we did, like it was a former DN chapter. I think they rebranded as Entheo Society or something like that. Yeah, so we've done some work and we understand what the people on the ground are saying, and that was a really powerful collection of grassroots organizers there. But really, there were some accusations made about MAPS, Bronner's, Peter Thiel's privateer group being in cahoots. I've seen no evidence of this, and there was an open invitation for evidence to be sent over to us last Friday. I've yet to see any. We're still open. If anybody has any, we're happy to read it. And this is all in the context of SB 519, which is the California bill, which would, roughly speaking, legalize psychedelic possession, manufacture, and transfers in California, non-monetary transfers. So gifting, social sharing, stuff like that. Really interesting. And, highly political conversations. I think on Friday, the day we actually released that episode, it was delayed. I think that's accurate, right?
Thursday, I think, because I think we had a student in our class report during class that it got stalled out and didn't pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bummer. I was really excited for this bill. It could have helped a lot of people in terms of underground therapy. There's probably more people per capita in California who are skilled enough to be doing this work or have been doing this work for a long time, meaning underground facilitation. More people there than anywhere else in the world probably have these skills, and now they can't, probably a year or two or more do it. But, in a year, we're going to have access.
They can vote on it next year. We're going to have
access in Oregon.
Sounds like so.
Okay. Yeah, what did you pick up in this article we found? There's a New York Times. Or what article did you find here?
Just a local article. It was at San Francisco Bay Area. I just did a quick search, so nothing. I'm sure Marijuana Movement has something about it as well, but just saying that it became a 2-year bill, but it's keeping it alive and it will be voted on next year. It's just pause at the moment. So I think there's still hope for it next year. But I think the big thing is just that something like this got in front of legislation, right? I think that's just a huge win in itself that these conversations
that it got
happening.
This far.
Yeah. Do you think this would have happened 10 years ago? Probably not. Right?
Absolutely not.
It probably would have. Yeah. So just that it got that far, I think is exciting. It really, I think, shows that the narrative around these substances are really starting to change. People are starting to become a little bit more open-minded. They might be reading the research and doing, just like feeling into that and noticing that, some of that stigma and taboo that's been around for a while is slowly shifting. At least that's how I view it. I hope that's accurate.
Yeah, it's things are progressing. There's even AOC is bringing this stuff at the federal level to federal government. And, it's been shut down twice, but there's a chance, they gained a ton of votes, more than doubled the votes on this bill this time around than the last time. So what happens in a few more years as MAPS and all these for-profit companies become a lot more mainstream, a lot more attention, right? So there's definitely a lot here. So anyway, we've not received any of these kind of secret documents that Decrim Nature alleges exist, and I'd be happy to review them if we get some sent over. But I without any evidence, I can't just say, oh yeah, like MAPS is clearly collaborating with Peter Thiel. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So if folks from DN and DN leadership want to send that over, all good. But yeah, my personal issue is with DN leadership and the behavior of the organization. It's, I'm okay with you all winning. I'm kind of not okay with this whole kind of bullying and infighting, and perhaps we can't even call it infighting anymore. Perhaps they're on a different track than many of us are. And how do we balance decriminalize nature's agenda with a general drug legalization or drug decriminalization bill like Oregon's, for instance, that decreases harm for Black communities and people of color far more than decriminalizing plant-based psychedelics? If we're talking about decreasing harm, that's a very different talk track than, and by harm I mean prison largely, and contaminated drugs. But how do we contrast that with people having access to psychedelic plants, and the benefits that could come from that? I can actually see a fair amount of negatives coming out of it. I see plenty of people going bonkers with these things prohibited already, partly because of people not having access to great information, misinformation, decades-long drug war, all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm not going to tell you what you should think. I just think there's a lot of things that folks should consider here. It's not a really simple story. And some people want things to be a really simple story, and it's not what we have on our hands.
No, as simple as life is, it's also pretty complex.
Right, especially when we have 7 billion people on the planet fighting for their own interests,
agendas, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, I'm cool on that. And then next up is this 920 giveaway. So 920 is coming up, and we're doing a pretty big giveaway. So stay tuned to our social media channels. We're going to be giving away courses, shirts, I think all sorts of products, books. So we'll announce it here once it's live, but you'll see it on our social media channels and probably do an email as well. So if you're not following us on socials or on our email list, get there and you'll be hearing about it and get a chance to win. It's like really big package. The mushroom version of 420. I actually don't know any of the group that put this together, but it's a mushroom celebration day, specifically psychedelic mushroom celebration day. And it's been around for what? I think we've had 2 or 3 so far.
I think it's been around for a while, because I remember I did a event. I was leading some breath work for a 920 event that Symposia put on back in, I think it was 2015 in Canada. And I think that was like kind of like the kickoff. So it could have been around like 2015, 2014. I forget when that date was, but I remember it happened in September, and did some breath work that weekend up there for that event. So it's been around for a while. I think it's gaining more momentum. I do kind of forget the backstory there, but yeah, it's just like the national mushroom holiday. But there is a reason for September. I just forget what it is. I'm sure if I do a quick Google search, I'd figure it out.
Just thinking about it, it's when a lot of mushrooms sprout, or fruit, sorry. And yeah, it's a beautiful time for mushroom hunting in a lot of environments. But yeah, if you figure it out, let us know. No worries. But anyway, it's an international celebration, psychedelic day. It's kind of like the other bicycle day. And you'll be seeing a lot of events around it, including the Mount Tam Psilocybin Summit, which is really cool. Great event.
Oh yeah, it's coming up soon. That's always a wonderful event that he puts on.
I was just thinking, may or may not have eaten mushrooms recently, and I was thinking about the high, as a high, not as like an inner, deep inner work experience like this. At times can feel like all the other drugs at once. So you get a lot of the different feelings. Not always, it's not that predictable, but you get a lot of really beautiful sensations and thinking done there. Even at, sub-extreme doses.
Yeah. So I found it on a Rolling Stones article here. It got going in 2015. So yeah, again, I think I was right on that date. Nicholas Reveal, if I pronounce his last name correctly. So he kind of started that. Advocate from Providence, Rhode Island, and dubbed September 20th an educational day of action. 9/20 was chosen because it's the beginning of autumn, when the mushrooms are most plentiful, because it's close to the equinox, representing a change in direction, and because it echoes 4/20, the successful movement for marijuana and decriminalization of legalization.
Cool. I love it. Yeah. I just found out that I think we're doing an event in October in downtown Denver. No dates confirmed yet, but it should be like a psychedelic education festival with a lot of these folks, trying to build some awareness on the psychedelic topic. So more as that comes around. But yeah, nothing confirmed 100% yet. And it's going to be a little bit around this topic of, working towards legalization of some kind, decriminalization, etc. And, getting people aware that there are professionals in this space with real deep training, that they might actually trust their loved ones with to get treatment. Yeah. I just found out about a friend of mine who developed a really aggressive drinking problem to the point where her eyes are yellow. And I've had to turn her down a number of times for sessions. I'm like, I'm just not the right person for you. I can probably find you somewhere to go if you're really into it, but I'm not necessarily your guy. And I feel a little bad about it, right? I think a lot of us do. We're like, I could have probably helped you, but I probably would put our relationship and myself in a really weird spot if I did that. Yeah. So
it's tough when you see there's potential here for people to get healing. Or just create some sort of change in their life, and it just doesn't feel right, or the risk, the liability to take on, and it's tough.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. So next up, let's talk a little bit more about this SP519 delay, because I think this is really historic, that it was delayed. I think there was some influence from Decrim Nature, particularly around possession limits, and they don't really like possession limits. There's a line that I've seen a few times saying decriminalization with possession limits is an oxymoron, and I'm like, maybe. So read a really quick definition here. It's a figure of speech that juxtaposes concepts with opposing meanings within a word or a phrase, that creates an ostensible self-contradiction. I see that there's some contradiction with possession limits, but I just disagree that it's like wholesale and oxymoron. And there are scenarios where it makes sense for some people to have gallons and gallons of ayahuasca, or pounds or kilos of things, but really that's when you have an operation operating at scale. I could see some issues with production, manufacture, transit, like who's giving you 2 kilos of ketamine for free, or even an ounce or 2, right? Same thing with ayahuasca, like probably isn't going to happen. So you're going to have some sort of transactional thing going for the economics of it to work. Perhaps that's what they were looking at. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Yeah, I don't know. What's your thought? Like, we've had a week or so to sit on the possession limits thing. Have you had any new realizations or thoughts on this?
I mean, just as you're talking, there's like some thoughts that are starting to form in different ways. And so the possession limits, I get to some degree, where DN is coming from. On the last episode, we talked about this in terms of decriminalization of cannabis in New York City. That just meant that stop and frisk could continue to happen and did happen, and people still getting arrested and fined, even though it was decriminalized. But, that possession limit was there. And I think it was like an ounce, but still people were getting charged for, possession at times. So I do get that. It kind of like, it does create some sort of saying like, you can have this, but, you can't have this amount and we can still fine you and arrest you or do whatever. And the other part that was coming up, you're talking about like economics. I'm thinking like, yeah, like what is like this new paradigm that they may be thinking about, or, what new paradigm would we want to see? So, I'm thinking of like small local farms, right? Like, let's just like kind of vision the future, what this could look like. What if it was like more community oriented? I think we're thinking from a capitalistic perspective of where somebody is growing, say, a bunch of ayahuasca and selling it. But what if it was more community oriented and they're growing it to, provide that to community healing? Would that possession limit still be valid if we were kind of thinking about some sort of new way of operating?
It sounds like yes, it would be. But what is that new way of operating? There's still got to be a little bit of transactionality there.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't see like a Banisteriopsis capi, an ayahuasca vine, kind of like rainforest in California necessarily. But perhaps there could be.
I don't know how well it grows there, but
right, because there's still going to have to be some trafficking from overseas, probably, be it Hawaii or South America or something. So there's still federal law being pushed up against there. So there's a lot of issues, yeah, but you're not wrong, Kyle, right? Like, can they vision a way in which the growers could be fed and kept healthy and happy, or manufacturers that's outside the scope of a kind of industrial model? Maybe. I don't know of any right now. Taxes, food, water, electricity seem to all cost money at this point. Perhaps there could be evolutions in that. But does that scale? Like, is that the party boat that Buckminster Fuller was talking about to like attract people over? I don't know. It could be. Like, I'm not so inclined to hang out on the DN plantations.
Right. Well, I guess just
but maybe others would
just
be.
like, let's say like mushrooms, for example. Like, somebody was a mushroom grower and there was like these community centers. Maybe it's not really trying to make a bunch of profit. People are just kind of coming together and they just want the healing. So to put a limit on that and say you can't grow X amount of mushrooms to provide to your community, obviously I'm thinking more in this like utopian type of framework where things are shifted a little bit away from just like, the capitalistic model.
And I used to grow and give them away for free, largely. Like, I think I made one trade once, and that was it. And this is, over 10 years ago. So I get it. It's fun as hell to grow mushrooms. It's beautiful. So I could see doing that, totally. And I, if I was that individual that wanted to manufacture a lot of mushrooms for a lot of people, I could see being upset about that. Yeah. So, I don't know. What do we think about the perfect being the enemy of the good? Right. Like, we've got to really consider that. And what are our shared values? Like, do we have shared values? So it looks like Scott Wiener put it on pause. I want to read a little quote here from Scott Wiener, the state senator who sponsored this bill. Quote, "While I'm disappointed we couldn't pass SB 519 this year, I'm heartened that the bill moved as deep into the process as it did, and that we have a realistic chance of passing it next year, said Wiener. Given that this idea had never before been introduced in the legislature, our progress is a testament to the power of the issue and the urgency of the need to act. So this was from sanfrancisco.cbslocal.com, published on August 26. There's another quote here. Decriminalizing psychedelics is an important step in ending the failed war on drugs, and we are committed to this fight. Our mental health crisis is worse than ever, and psychedelics have shown great promise in treating mental health issues from PTSD to anxiety and depression. Wiener stated, I look forward to working hard to continue this fight. So it's not necessarily showing, like, discussing like why it needed to be paused here in this article, but I imagine there is a lot of controversy and people getting loud, and maybe, they just needed a little break from all of that attention. And, given how serious the wildfire situation is in Lake Tahoe and other parts of California right now, that they probably really need to focus on more immediate concerns, like large, towns disappearing. There's a lot of towns that are just not going to come back.
Terrifying and scary.
Yeah.
Well, I hope the folks out in California listening are staying safe. It's really scary.
Heart goes out to you. I evacuated only once, and it was not great because of fire. Really, really kind of scary. You don't know if you're going to be able to go home or not. And a lot of you already know you're not going to be able to go home. But I'm thinking about a way of supporting some of the relief efforts, Kyle. I was thinking about it this morning.
Awesome.
So we'll probably make some announcements later on about
Sweet.
This. Yeah.
But something else that's coming in my mind just around this in general, like, I don't know why this popped in my head. Maybe it doesn't relate. Maybe it does. But just thinking about, like, okay, so if you were free to grow mushrooms and give them away, like, when does, like, regulation just kind of come into play here? So I'm thinking about, like, I had some people that raise cows, right? And they couldn't just like sell their meat to friends. I mean, they could, but it needs to go through some, food processing center, and it needs to go through a whole process because that's regulated. And we're thinking, okay, if we wanted to scale down to be more local, and say we're in the fight for, local hunger, for example. Well, I'm going to raise all these cows and then, butcher the meat up. Like, there's still that regulatory process that people have to go through for, food safety and consumption. And so, just even thinking about it from that perspective, like, so somebody grows a bunch of mushrooms, synthesizes a bunch of LSD, from a safety perspective, so yeah, I feel like these regulations and rules end up coming into play due to safety issues, right? So that's going to happen eventually. So even I think in that like utopian world, it sounds nice, but also is it realistic? Like, what happens when people start getting sick, right? That's why regulations and these things start to unfold to protect people and put safety guidelines around things. It's like, as much as I would love to think like nothing bad would happen, we also probably know that that's not necessarily true, right?
I've lost a lot of friends over psychedelic overuse. I know people who have had to go into psychiatric hospitals due to psychedelic overuse. We know of plenty of people who have been hurt or killed from a contaminated supply line. There's this idea. Are you familiar with this concept of a naturalistic fallacy?
I don't think so. Maybe not.
It's reading it from Wiki right now. Naturalistic fallacy is the idea that what is found in nature is good, and it was the basis of social Darwinism, the belief that helping the poor and sick. Yeah. So, really, it's the idea that like anything that's natural is good or good for you, and anything that's artificial, meaning like from humans, in terms of an art, is lesser than possibly. So I'm thinking like Rousseau. So get this: the British philosopher G.E. Moore not my grandfather, in Principia Ethica, more argues that it would be fallacious to explain that which is good reductively, or to explain that which is good reductively in terms of natural properties such as pleasant or desirable. Yeah. So like poison
I was going to say
sucks.
poison ivy.
Like,
that was
it's
the
not
first
necessarily
thing.
great to eat hemlock.
Those are all examples that pop into my mind.
Mosquitoes are a pain in the ass. Ticks,
Yeah.
like they, they play a role in ecologies, but like, it's not necessarily an amazing, thing. So like, is LSD better than poison ivy? I would say so. But other people are going to say, no, it's not. So, it's something that we should pay attention to. But I get Deanne's point here. Like, I don't want government getting in the way of my religion.
Yeah.
But when I say I don't want government getting in the way of me healing, that's a different thing, right?
Why is that different?
This is like, Wilhelm Reich got in some deep shit here. Religion and healing. How do we want to frame this? Well, me communing with spirits and or God,
people could
or
have
gods,
healing
plural.
and religious, right?
Absolutely. There is overlap, like in a Venn diagram sense, right? But it's not always the case that religion heals, right? Like, I spent a lot of time and have a lot of family in the Catholic Church. They don't look healed at all. And there's plenty of other denominations and religious groups not doing great. NXIVM, Scientology, etc.
Totally.
Like, some people would say Scientology heals, but if you've got a ruptured bowel and you want your Scientology priest to come down to help you, like, a perforated bowel is probably going to kill you pretty quick. And, how are you going to be able to pray that away? And let's think about social harms, like this whole pray the gay away situation. Like, that's religious and valid for some traditions, and I think it's fucking crazy. And it, in fact, harms a lot of people. So not all religious things are good. There's even apocalyptic religious cults that want to end the world, right? Like, this is a big stream in a lot of these Abrahamic faiths. Really, kind of niche culty stuff, right? But it's there. Robert Anton Wilson covered it pretty well in Illuminatus trilogy, the concept of eminentizing the eschaton. That's a subtext, to a lot of these religious movements. Like, when Jesus comes back, or when, the trumpets sound for the Mormons, then they're saved. Their specific group is saved and goes to heaven. Everybody else, good luck, or you knew this was coming, so it's your fault. It's an interesting concept. It's I don't really know what to do about it, but just be aware that there is this whole like apocalyptic threat in religion, and then in some religions, and then is that healing? I don't know. Like, I feel better than you, therefore I'm healed. Like, I know I'm going to heaven, therefore I'm healing. Like, no. Though, being in community, like you and I recorded with John Cobb years ago, John Cobb laid out his vision of what church is like for him. I was like, like, I would have been going to church all the time if I knew about John Cobb's
Do you remember
church.
what that
like,
was?
That is not, it was just community-based, embracing. It wasn't like, fire and brimstone. It was kind of process-oriented and aware. And I'm like, this is really an enlightened thread of Christianity. That's probably would have been my hurdle. Would I go to a Christian church or not? I don't know. But his framing of this whole thing was great. It was almost like his edition of Dream Shadow. Right? Like, they're doing the community thing, they're doing the higher values thing, like we'll lean on Plato and whatnot. And then, they'll do more kind of scriptural stuff, I think, in Whitehead. So it's a little different. But, community heals. Being seen and being witnessed heals. These are some of the things that are inherent in religious practices that are really helpful for people.
Yeah.
If we don't want to, like, go all the way to talk about metaphysics and, like, non-human entities helping us and whatnot and healing us. Like, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Probably too much to get into.
Just
here.
makes me think of a paper I wrote for one of my social justice classes in grad school around the community aspect of church and religion, and how, like, just viewing how, like, a lot of people are moving away from that, and what does that do to the community? Like, just thinking about like what the church did. So I was like volunteering there on like, donating and all those social causes. But like, how many people would get involved with that but aren't getting involved with it because it's tied to organized religion, and maybe they wanted to move away from it. And just thinking like, yeah, where are these like centers that kept people together, that felt connected to a community? And I think that's the role that some of those organizations really played. I think it's important.
I had to come up with a personal justification for the existence of the Catholic Church, because I get really bummed out about the history there, how many books were destroyed on account of empire, and how many people were killed, and oppressed generally. And I was like, it was a stabilizing force in a really weird, pivotal time in human history, and that was the best thing I could come up with. My hope is that there were less extreme wars and more stability for more people for many years as a result of the church. And that was my only real justification. I'm like, this is tough, but how does this relate to psychedelics? Is a big point. Like, so let's look at some psychedelic groups. Like, not all psychedelic groups are helpful for humans, right? Like, we've seen some really bad behavior in the psychedelic space. We've also seen groups evolve and reform over time. Like it's pretty easy to hurt somebody if you're working with them in psychedelic states, right? Not everybody's going to get hurt. Not everybody's going to be hurt to an extreme degree, but brother and sister doing an MDMA session together or something like that, as you've seen, put somebody in a hospital for a few weeks. That said, the person came out great on the other side. It's like, what the fuck is that about? Like, maybe you just needed a few weeks to like reconsolidate in a nice, comfortable environment with no stress. Well,
follow the process.
Maybe no stress isn't the right framing. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, imagine the hospital
and
settings
Quakers, giving people timeouts. Totally. Yeah. So, And are all Amazonian religions appropriate for Westerners? I don't know. I don't really think so. Is it inappropriate for some Westerners to be practicing some Amazonian religions? Probably. I'm not going to universalize and claim any real big judgments here, but LSD scales, mushrooms scale, ayahuasca, I don't think we can get enough out to everybody in the world in appropriate ways. But I think we could do it with LSD.
Yeah. And it comes back to that, like,
given where we're at culturally on a global scale.
It comes back to that interesting question. It kind of pops in my head again, but now that you're bringing like LSD back up, it's like, this whole naturalistic fallacy that you're bringing up. It's like, well, where did this stuff come from? Anything came from nature, right? Or is it just like, I know
are we different from nature?
I know we tinker with molecules and, stuff like that, but it came from somewhere, right? It just didn't, like, why does that make it always bad, right? And I get the aspect of like, extracting and, extracting molecules, and you don't have the entourage effect when we're talking about plant medicine. But, everything came from something. So what is natural?
Right. What is natural? Yeah. Are we not part of nature? Are our creations not part of nature? Yes, there's a difference between a honeybee and an iPhone, but like, it's still from the same source, unless we start, talking aliens and whatnot, which I don't think we want to. So it's, there's a lot of complexity here, and having simple answers is nice and probably comforting, but I don't see them. I don't see them as abounding. So we need to come up with, what are our values? Why are we doing this stuff? And what do we want to see created? Like, you and I had a really cool conversation about that earlier. Like, I'd like to see a post-prohibition future, no more drug war. People are safe. They're educated on how to use all of these things. There's real deal experts with centers globally where you can access all this stuff. I can be legal going to a Fish show. Other folks can be legal going to Wu-Tang Clan shows, smoking tons of weed in front stage, sharing blunts with Method Man, which one of my friends got to do once, which nice. A little jealous. Yeah, I think that was before legalization in Colorado too, which is awesome. But yeah, like legalize Burning Man.
Right.
Like let's start there, or let's like legalize being human, right? Like people want to alter their consciousness. This is a human trait. Anything from spinning in circles to boozing to smoking cigarettes to whatever. Like we want to alter our consciousness, and it seems universal.
It totally is. Yeah.
Right.
I remember that was the one thing when I was younger, spinning in circles felt like I would get in touch with God or something. Yeah, it just, yeah, I just love that. Like, why are we so interested in psychedelics? Like why are we doing what we're doing? I mean, I really think about it. From my perspective, it's like, I had this like really profound experience when I was younger with this near-death experience, and that really opened me up of like, wait, there's like a new way of being and seeing the world. Like we can try to create something new. Why are we kind of boxing ourselves in at times? And then when I came across psychedelics, I'm like, oh shit, like this may be a tool, right? Just a tool that helps us to get in touch with that and to have more of a human experience. And for me, like psychedelics have kind of really taught me that, like, how do we embody the human experience and really feel into a lot of this? And what would the world look like if we all were able to kind of touch into that a little bit more? If we were able to, really think about, like, what does it mean to be human? How can we enhance that? I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, like, yeah, we have like a therapy to address this. We have, I like this like multi-context approach. Like therapy is good, dancing and music is great. Having more of the spiritual aspect is wonderful, and also just the creative aspect, right? And I think, one thing that's been driving me forward in this mission and vision is just seeing, like, yeah, what does a post-prohibition world look like, and what is the potential of humans and culture, right? Like, and what role do psychedelics play in amplifying that and accelerating it? I think it's exciting, and it's a pursuit that I don't know. It's the only thing that really captures my attention. What are we doing here? What's our role here? And how are we showing up? And I don't know, for me, psychedelics, holotropic breathwork, and all that other stuff is like really got me to question it and think, yeah, there's other ways that we could be showing up in the world. And it's kind of cool.
It's pretty neat. Like what an adventure. I think I brought this up a little while ago. I rewatched that Groff documentary, The Way of the Psychonaut, and there's this line from Groff talking about how being born to something new is not necessarily a comfortable process. So we are almost literally being born into something new right now. What that thing is, we're still participating in that process right now as awake adults, right? But what does that look like? What does 50 years out look like? Are we living in a hive? Is it like the Matrix? I saw Andrew Gallimore a while ago saying, embrace the hive. It's the future. I'm like, oh my God. But, like what can we collectivize to decrease our, total carbon output? And, is there a way to be really happy in a more collectivized future? Possibly. I don't know that we're necessarily going to have to go there, but if we have to go there, psychedelics can play, and drugs generally can play a really helpful role there.
Yeah, and just I was just talking with somebody yesterday, Beth Weinstein, for her new summit that she's putting on series, but just even talking about the role of psychedelics in death, right? And how much of like some of the issues that we bump up against culturally and societally is our fear and confrontation with death. And how do psychedelics play a role in helping us to embody this life a little bit more? And that's obviously been one of the biggest things in my life. It's like, yeah, this, how do we really think about that? How does death influence us on a day-to-day? Do we not think about it? Do we only think about like, kind of like these short-term things, or just wanting to extend it constantly and not really kind of battling up against like, one day it's all going to end. What does that even mean to you? What does that mean to the human race. What happens? Yeah, again, like your comments about climate change and the environment. What happens when there's mass displacement of people. Important questions to ask, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, it all plays in together, right? Like, what is going to be the impact on the natural populations of religious plants and plants with religious implications? Peyote, massive impact due to UV. Ayahuasca, we're seeing, accelerating deforestation in the Amazon basin, so probably a lot there. Thankfully, it can be grown in a lot of places, so that's helpful. I think iboga is in trouble a little bit. I'm starting to see some alternate plants get accelerated use, maybe displacing the iboga use, which is nice. And then because people need it for their religion, right? So that's really helpful. And it's an interesting concept, right? Like valuing the people who have been at it for many thousands of years over people who just found out about it, within the last 20, who don't necessarily have a genetic lineage there. It's an interesting discussion. I don't really know where I land on it, but I'm, all for protecting plants and giving the original peoples who've suffered so much advanced access. 5-MeO, if we look at the toad, UV is really going to impact that. The populations are really down in the Sonoran Desert as heat and development accelerate. We're going to see quite a bit, like that whole stretch between the Gulf of California and the Arizona border. Massive amounts of development and roads going in there, interrupting 5-MeO DMT habitat, like for the Sonoran Desert toads. And same thing in Arizona, like Arizona and Phoenix. Phoenix is growing at an unreasonable rate, and it's a massive habitat for these toads. Same with Tucson. Probably Tucson, I bet, is growing because it's not far from Phoenix, and Phoenix is blowing up.
Oh, and there's also other issues.
There's probably a lot more I could list. Yeah.
Too, other than the toad, right? I mean, like blackouts and not enough water there, and
right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, they're in deep. But not for psychedelics today to do all the climate stuff. But yeah, like Phoenix, you're in for a rough ride. Hold on to your butts and maybe read a little bit on how you might want to weather that storm. Yeah. So what else? Yeah, that's just a rough overview of things that are going to be impacted in terms of plants and animals. As combo gets more exciting for folks, what does that even look like? Are we going to have like combo frog farms? Like that seems a little problematic. Combo already looks pretty problematic, so I don't know. I'm a little uncomfortable around combo. We saw somebody almost die. I know a physician who his wife told him it's the only thing he's not allowed to do on account of some of the extreme reactions that are pretty well reported and documented. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting landscape to be negotiating. I don't I don't want to be too authoritarian, so like I'm allowing people to do whatever they want to do. Like I'm all for like ultimate freedom, but freedom is a two-edged sword. We need a lot more responsibility and accountability. Yeah, and can we even have that when people haven't been given the same opportunities folks like you and I have been given, Kyle, right?
Yeah.
We're definitely very privileged in the space, especially with our mentorship and, totally. I guess just geographically where we come from too. Yeah. So I think that's why we give so much away for free and do so much free work is we want everybody to have it. It's just a matter of like, how do we keep the lights on while we let everybody have it?
Yeah, and it's a tough thing, right? I mean, like coming back to like origin story, like, this is a passion project and just something we felt super passionate about, right? now trying to make it into a career or something sustainable so we can keep it going. It's a different story. So yeah, at the roots of it, it's like, this is just, something that we've just been so deeply interested in our, just pretty much our lives, right? For so long.
Absolutely obsessed. I was reflecting on this recently, like going to sleep for years in a row, listening to Psychedelic Salon, like every single day, every single night. Plus doing a lot of breath work, plus reading books, plus exploring the occult and esoteric and all this stuff. It's quite a foundation. It's hard to really emulate that. It's hard to give somebody that same kind of edge. I would say, listen to every single episode of the Psychedelic Salon if you want a good foundation, but start way back. Or at least do it up to, like, I don't know, 2012 or something like that. There's so much good material in there.
Yeah, and a lot of it was Terrence too, right? You had a lot of Terrence episodes.
So much Terrence, so much Tim, Sasha, Anne, Shulgin, like so much amazing stuff. I think we even got some, I think even there was some good Cat Harrison lectures in there. There's so much, right? Because, I think he was able to...
He does a really great job curating that archive.
Totally. He had the whole Terrence McKenna archives. He had access to recording these conferences at Burning Man, Palenque Norte, which is the northern version of the Palenque conferences that were happening in Yucatan, Mexico. And amazing that we have access to all this stuff and all these old school folks.
Yeah.
Even like Bruce Damer. Are you familiar with Bruce Damer? Yeah. Magical individual. We exchanged some emails. I just never was able to coordinate getting him on the show.
Lived in New Jersey at some point. I don't know if he grew up there.
Yeah, fascinating.
Or something like that. I think I remember reading that in his bio. It's like, oh, shit. I could be wrong.
I could see something like that. He aerospace. He works in aerospace, I think. So, New Jersey would make sense at some point. But yeah, just there's so many amazing visionaries that have put out so much for free, and that's probably a big reason why we put out so much for free too. We wanted to contribute in kind like that when we can. 95% of what.
Well, I think like you
free.
emphasize that like visionary aspect. Like I just think about like all those people that like put stuff out, like the ideas. That's the stuff that kept me going through like some of those dark periods or this or that. Like just hearing Terrence talk about things, or just these folks that have been around for a while, just like spouting their visions for the future and how psychedelics could play a role in it. I mean, some days where I was just deep in existential dread from just what I was going through. It's like those things kept me alive, just hearing these people's like visions and ideas of the future of like how this could radically shift humanity. I'm like, whoa, yes. thank you
Right. And they've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and often in community with others, right? It's magical to even consider. Yeah. So, what are we getting at? We're part of a lineage. We try to be part of this tradition that a lot of us call our origin story. It's not from Native American church. It's not necessarily exclusively from Amazonian or Groff traditions, though that's where I kind of lay my hat. But it's an interdisciplinary thing. It's a whole global web of information and collaboration. There's just so much here. And revisioning everything. Like my mantra back when I was coordinating with Evolver and Reality Sandwich was we need total systems change. Like everything is sick and broken. So I get that sentiment. I've just decided it's, I can probably contribute best doing what I'm doing right now. And, cheerleading for some of you that are doing really great positive work out there when it comes up.
Yeah. And how does that contribute to a system change, right?
Yeah. What were you born here to do? Yeah. If you want to flip it, why did you decide to be born here, and what's your task that you gave yourself? There's so many interesting things and ways you can look at being born on Earth. This Terrence McKenna quote I shared last night. I choose not to believe anything because as soon as I believe it, it excludes believing its opposite. And, being really intellectually fluid, I think, is a skill that could help us quite a bit here in this really strange time we find ourselves. This comes back to the reality tunnels that Robert Anton Wilson talks about generally. And let's put on our Marxist lens. Let's put on our capitalist lens, environmental lens, etc., indigenous lens to analyze a problem. And that way you have a much more nuanced understanding of all of the problems in a certain scenario.
Yeah.
There's probably infinite lenses we can put on as we're looking at something. Like I remember recording with Franklin King and Fernando Epsi Forson from Mass General the other day, months ago. And they said, as a doctor, I'm concerned. As a citizen, I'm really excited. So I'm like, that's an interesting framing. And I wonder how often physicians have to deal with that, or medical pros and researchers have to deal with that. Like my university position is this. I'm a little worried about getting kicked out if I get a little more radical and tell people what I really believe. But here's my professional opinion. Here's my personal opinion. I find that really interesting. Yeah,
I'm always juggling that too, right? Like, how are you showing up, and what masks and hats are you wearing, and how do you have like different belief systems at times based on the role that you're in?
Yeah. So there was a final article I want to mention. Saw this one get a lot of play. Psychedelic therapy is here, but the doctors aren't ready. Meaning, people understand that ketamine and cannabis-assisted psychotherapies are real and here now and available, and that people are going overseas and or doing this stuff illegally, and doctors aren't ready. They're not educated enough to be able to handle this influx. Medical school's bare bones. So I don't expect to see this really added to the curriculum anytime soon of regular practitioners, though. I think psychiatrists should really, have some of this education in med school so they can understand where to put it. Or at least some psychiatrists should be specializing on this so they can consult for other physicians who might need help here and there.
There's a good paragraph here. So this is in the LA Times, but this kind of stood out. It's quote, whether or not lawmakers are ready to legalize psychedelic treatments, hospitals and health systems have a duty to educate skeptical physicians, nurses, and therapists so that they can give good advice about such drugs. They should do so gladly because psychedelic therapy has proven remarkably effective in treating certain mental health disorders. And I thought that was just interesting. Again, like people are doing it, right? And how are we keeping people safe? And providing some good information, and also, creating a container for people to feel safe sharing with their providers, right? And it kind of ends here. This is like the last paragraph. It's not a question on whether people will use psychedelics in the pursuit of mental health. They do, and they will. So let's hope patients feel comfortable talking to their healthcare providers about it. When providers face that moment, they should know how to keep patients safe, and they should know better than to stand between ill patients and promising treatments. And it looks like this was written by Rick Doblin.
Cool. Good.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation.
And Jennifer Altman.
Cool. Do you know her? I don't know Jennifer's work. Okay. But it's cool to know that Rick is getting play like this. And there needs to be so much more education on this topic. And we're really just scratching the surface of who needs to be educated. We've been at it for a while. We've had over 400 people through our Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists program. And there's, many hundreds of thousands of people that need to be educated on this. So we're making a small dent. but we need to make a lot bigger of a dent, and we're hoping. And it's going to be a collaborative effort. We can't train everybody. No group can train everybody. So, let's figure out what the ecosystem needs to look like. Yeah. Cool. All right. Anything else you want to get into, Kyle?
No, I think that's about it for today. Yeah.
Cool. All right, everybody. Really appreciate you all listening. I hope this was interesting. Hopefully we didn't ramble too much, though I think the rambling is often where the gold is. So let us know what you think. Support at psychedelicstoday.com. If you want to give us some feedback, we'll definitely get it. Reminder, September 23, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists comes out. We're running almost daily webinars if you're interested and want to ask questions from Kyle, David, or I about the course. And we'd really love to have you. And I don't know, anything else we want to mention? Pay attention to what's going on in Tahoe. Help those people out. Also, Louisiana has been hit really hard, so help them out if you can too. So please,
community
support
effort.
each other, love each other when you can, or at least have compassion for one another. Yeah, absolutely. Takes a village, and we're deep in it, in the process. So have some compassion for yourself as well out there. This is not an easy time to be a human.
No, it's an exciting time, but also challenging.
Best of times and the worst of times, I think it has been said. All right, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in to Psychedelics Today, Solidarity Fridays. This is Joe Moore with Cobb Buller, and we will see you again on our upcoming Tuesday episode. Hope you all have a lovely Labor Day weekend in the U.S. and elsewhere. And we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye.